What is up, YouTube? Coach Kolton here, building bodies money simply cannot buy. I recently made a video discussing my rest day protocol for the best possible rest day. I talked about some natural aspects of a rest day, and then I talked about some not so natty aspects of a rest day and things you can leverage to get the most results. I was asked a lot of questions about how to leverage the unnatty side of it besides just listing what I used or would use in this scenario. And so in this video, and I'm going to touch on all the stuff I use in here, I'm going to be a little bit specific, but I'm not sure if I'm going to give doses quite yet for some of the things like insulin, but this is my protocol and what I would do on a specific rest day. So glutathione, which is like the first product I would probably use on a rest day or before a rest day, is the most powerful antioxidant in the human body. Well, it's the reduced form, GSH. Several clinical conditions can be managed with glutathione, and it's quite an interesting molecule if you do your due diligence through research. It influences redox status and alters transcription factors such as NF-kappa B, which regulates the synthesis of cytokines and various adhesion molecules. And yes, there's gonna be a lot of cuts in this video because honestly, guys, my memory is terrible, so I have to write everything down that I talk about in great detail. And you can see this is like a 3-page essay that I'm trying to summarize in a couple statements. But understanding that it can alter cytokine and these adhesion molecule production, therefore you can extrapolate that glutathione is going to protect against inflammatory damage and total body inflammation, which is something we just did a lot of throughout the week of training. It has been an extremely legitimate therapy for things like diabetes, uremia, coronary disease, cancerous and immunodeficient states. These are all things that bodybuilders are subjecting ourselves to. We don't hear about cancer much in bodybuilding, but it is a very legitimate thing, especially hepatic cancer and various other cancers like thyroid cancers. Glutathione also has a very interesting role as far as I hate that word, but detoxifying our body. It can reduce the amount of xenobiotics within our blood serum and various other compounds that aren't contributing to any successful factors, but more so deleterious to our health. There is some evidence that glutathione can interplay with melanocytes and cause hyperpigmentation of the skin, so beware when using too frequently at too high of a dose, because you can get this like whitish hue to your skin. I already have that, so it's not a huge issue for me. But things in like Eastern countries, Eastern Asian countries, they actually use this superdose glutathione in an IV injection and leverage it to get lighter skin because that's kind of sought after in those countries, which is an interesting fact. Oral glutathione has very negligible effects. I mean, there's almost zero studies that can show any sort of serum increased levels in GSH. Granted, it's almost impossible to measure intracellular content of certain compounds, but there's a good hunch that it's probably not bioavailable. And if you're buying something that has direct glutathione in it, you're probably not getting any benefit out of it. Whereas injectable glutathione has been shown at least through IV. There's been no clinical data in it, unfortunately, or intramuscular. There's no clinical data on either of these things. But there is personal abstracts from people who have used this long-term, done their own blood work and due diligence, showing that, especially one Redditor, he went through a very long process of 6 months using intramuscular glutathione, and he showed that his GSH levels drastically increased. Again, we can't really measure the intracellular content of GSH, but we can determine that if the serum levels are going up, likely there's some intracellular content going up as well. If you're opposed to injecting glutathione, you can use something like N-acetylcysteine, which can donate cysteine to the production of glutathione within your body. It has actually been extremely effective at raising levels of GSH. I just don't think it's as effective as intramuscular injections of actual glutathione. NAC also has its own off-target antioxidant effects, which is pretty cool. So it gives you a surplus of effect, one from itself, and then two from the downstream production of glutathione. So what I personally do with my glutathione is making sure that I'm using taurine-based bacteriostatic water. Why taurine? Because taurine is going to enhance the efficacy of glutathione in conversion into its reduced state GSH. I would use about 500 to 600 milligrams on the night before my rest day. So the overnight cascades of like restorative nature can take place with an excess amount of glutathione, and then I last that entire day without having these highly burdening effects of training and doing all these stressful things, eating lots of carbohydrates, and I can really enhance my anti-inflammatory status during those specific days. I would probably limit myself to 2 injections weekly. I don't see benefit in going over that personally in my blood work, especially my liver enzymes. Interestingly, I've seen like a maxed out benefit at about 2 injections per week. So what I personally would do again is maybe on my 2 rest days a week, I'm going to inject the night prior to those rest days wake up fresh in the morning, as well as while you're sleeping, your glymphatic and lymphatic system are clearing out. So it kind of makes sense to reduce inflammatory status as well as cytokine production overnight, and then waking up in that freshened sort of state, if you will. And then with NAD+, this is a whole nother very, very diverse topic we could go into for hours about longevity, brain health, all sorts of total body status type things, and how NAD+ interacts with sirtuin status and all these different cool proteins that do a lot of different stuff in your body. But the basis of what I want to pull across through this video is that NAD is a huge modulator to cellular bioenergetics. It also alters genomic stability, mitochondrial biogenesis, and adaptive stress responses, as well as cellular survival. It also plays an integral role in well over 300 enzymes in your body, which enzymes are the keys to all hormones and the metabolites of them. So if you usually hormonal issues aren't actually hormonal issues, they're enzyme issues, and we have to figure out kind of which one, which makes it a little bit hard, but that's besides the point. NAD+ specifically plays a very large role in glycolysis, or using carbohydrates as fuel. It also plays an integral role in the citric acid cycle, basically allowing an individual to produce more ATP in any given moment throughout the day. While sirtuin data is still up in the air as if it's even reliable data to call upon, there is some very cool and interesting stuff relating to NAD+ activating sirtuin proteins. Really cool. But what we've seen is that through these SIRT proteins and various other ones, enhance brain function, and specifically the myelination of neurons, or more so accurately dendrites. It also can directly improve, activating these SIRT proteins, it directly improves mitochondrial capacity of your neurology essentially, and reduces systemic inflammation within your brain. Really powerful stuff. The reason that is so important is because since these higher levels of NAD in the brain can enhance our inflammatory status, or rather lower inflammatory states, when we've gone through a week of training and we've taxed our CNS through the roof, we're gonna have a lot of neural inflammation. We're gonna have a lot of inflammation in general. And so this is what I'm using more specifically to target that neural inflammation, to alleviate some of the pressures there, and again, help my glymphatic system kind of purge the brain and neural areas of those metabolites that we don't necessarily want up there in a more enhanced manner. So usually what I'm looking to do with this is leverage an ability to push myself a little bit further through a mesocycle. So let's say I'm doing like a 12-week push and I'm really pushing volume in the gym, I'm pushing intensity. If I'm able to use these things on a rest day, on a weekly basis, and maybe enhance my CNS fatigue and as well my peripheral fatigue, that might be a really good option to continue getting more gains out of my mesocycle for another 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. More stimulus equals more growth in a longer duration. NAD can kind of drive the directionality of metabolic responses. So what we see, especially in people who are chronically fed in states of like a high fat diets, and specifically just chronically fed, like us bodybuilders eating 5, 6, 7, 8 meals a day, is that NAD can actually shift someone into more of a positive effect, or a positive status metabolically, as opposed to having like deleterious effects, depositing fatty acids into the liver and creating, you know, fatty liver disease, which I'm assuming, in my hypothesis, is that most fucking bodybuilders have fatty liver disease. You can see this in almost any group of people when they're standing on stage. Even as a classic physique guy, you can see people with protruding bellies, and that's simply because I believe they have fatty liver disease from chronically eating. So that's NAD. What would I do with that? I'm gonna take anywhere from, and this is just my personal experience, you guys, so please take with this what you will, but I would take anywhere from 100 to 200 milligrams intramuscularly, again, night before my rest days with the glutathione. So that's gonna be something I do at least twice a week. I might move that up because it's not so, there's no at least good data on toxicity levels of it, so I might do that 3 to 4 times a week. I've found that I get a pretty substantial energy boost the following day after using that compound. So I don't know, kind of experiment with it, be your own N=1, start at the lowest effective dose, play around and see what you feel most comfortable with there. But that's personally what I'm gonna do. If you need to find NAD+ in an injectable format, Better Through Biology on Instagram has all of that stuff you need, as well as the injectable taurine bacteriostatic water for the glutathione that I was mentioning earlier. So again, nebivolol, why am I going to use that on a specific rest day? Well, nebivolol is a highly selective beta-adrenergic antagonist with a pharmaceutical profile that differs from all other adrenergic antagonists. It is extremely selective to cardiac beta-1 receptors, and it also has this awesome effect at improving nitric oxide synthase and release, so you have more systemic levels of nitric oxide, meaning better arterial flow, better boners, and better pumps in the gym, which is pretty fucking sweet. As well, it's not only going to lower your sympathetic rate because you're not so driven by that adrenergic or adrenaline-like state through your cardiac muscles, but it's also going to lower your blood pressure. So you're going to have a lower heart rate, a higher HRV, and a lower resting blood pressure, which is extremely vital when it comes to bodybuilders. It is highly beta-1 selective, like I said, but that's been found at about 10 milligrams a day. Exceeding that can kind of shift its selectivity a little bit, so you want to stick around that 10 milligrams a day of nebivolol. And this is extremely important to understand because the beta-1 selectivity of this specific compound and around the myocardium itself or the heart is vital for athletes because we experience left ventricular hypertrophy at a high level. And so if we can alter the amount of hypertrophy happening to our heart using periodic use of nebivolol, we're going to have a lot longer of a career, as well as we're going to lower blood pressure and heart rate. So these things all compound into very positive effects. But the caveat here is with a decreased heart rate, decreased blood pressure, we're going to experience a decreased level of metabolic rate. And so this is why I use it periodically. Personally, my blood pressure is not really ever out of whack. My heart rate stays between 50 beats per minute to 65, 70 beats per minute at the absolute highest when I'm like blasting a ton of shit. I'm going to use it intermittently because I don't want to lower disadvantageously my metabolic rate. Nebivolol is also nice because you can take it, it reaches peak concentrations in about an hour to 4 hours, depending on how fast you can metabolize drugs. It is metabolized mostly by the liver through glucuronidation, so that is something to be aware of. And in fact, 2% of people who have used this drug in clinical literature have experienced pretty high increases within ALT, SLT, so that is something you also want to be aware of. If you're already having deleterious effects done to your liver through some oral compounds, or your liver health just isn't where it needs to be, then maybe this compound might not be for you. I would maybe get things in order there first and then maybe implement this later on. And the cool thing about it is the elimination half-life is about 12 hours, at most 19 hours for, again, poor metabolizers of this drug, but very important to understand because you can take it in the morning on a rest day, get the positive effects exerted onto us for that rest day for the most part, and then resume the training day without this antagonism to the adrenergic system, which is good, right? Because when we're training, we want a fast heart rate, we want a little bit of a higher blood pressure so that we can really get into it and get adrenaline, right? Like if you think about it, why would we suppress adrenaline during training? That kind of seems counterintuitive. It 100% is. So this is why I like this compound. It's shorter half-life, it's more beneficial profile to its selectivity, and most importantly, its compounding effects, right? It's polytrophic in its effects. So it has a lowering blood pressure, it has a lowering heart rate, it has this nitric oxide release, which is awesome to see. It has an amazing effect at how selective it is to specifically the myocardium, which means lower hypertrophy of the heart tissue. Beautiful compounds. I'm not going to get into MK677. We all know exactly what that is. It is a growth hormone secretagogue and a ghrelin kind of mimetic. It plays a role as if it was ghrelin within the body. And so what happens is you take it, it increases the endogenous release of your growth hormone. So the pulsatility of your growth hormone goes skyrocketing. It's not like you're taking exogenous hormones. We all know what insulin does, and especially a basal insulin like Lantus, I would take about 10 IUs within the morning on a rest day, maybe 5 IUs depending on where I am in the season. But that's obviously going to enhance nutrient partitioning. As well, the inhibition of the mineralocorticoids that insulin can do is really positive. So it's going to decrease stress response as well as improve the restorative cascades we're looking to do through JAK-STAT pathways and various other things. So we're going to get this like background sort of basal increase in anabolism, as well as the restorative states that we want, and put you into a parasympathetic state using just a touch of insulin in that morning window that's going to last pretty much for the rest of the day. I really like this method. Then we also combine that with some L-carnitine mixed with choline. Again, we all know what L-carnitine does, right? It's going to increase the ability for your body to leverage the entrance of fatty acids into the mitochondrial mitochondria, so valuable aspects there, right? But more importantly, it can improve cognitive function. It can also reduce stress to the heart. There's been a lot of data showing that L-carnitine strictly can literally change the morphology of the heart, just like Nebivolol, and as well improve the mitochondrial efficiency of your myocardium, the tissue around there. So I would use all this stuff in conjunction. Now, how would I place it about? I've kind of already explained what I would do with the glutathione, taking that the night before at anywhere from 300 to 600 milligrams intramuscular injection. I would take NAD plus 100 to 200 milligrams the night before rest day intramuscular injection. I would take MK677 at 25 milligrams the night before my rest day or the morning of my rest day. I'm not so specific on which one. I like the night before because that kind of follows our circadian biology, and it is normally following when we're typically going to be pulsating as much growth hormone as our body will, and then we get the nice restorative cascades from that. But if you take it in the morning, you get this extra pulse of growth hormone, so it's hard to say which one might be better. I'm gonna say either or. It just depends on what your preference is and how hungry that compound makes you. I get no hunger effects from it, so I can take it either or. It doesn't really bother me, but I just typically place it either at night or in the morning at 25 milligrams. The L-carnitine with choline, again, this can be found at Better Through Biology on Instagram. This stuff is great. I would take this directly in the morning, just before my first meal or before slight activity. That choline is really gonna help the cholinergic system within your brain starting to get activated. Very positive stuff on a rest day, and this again for restorative cascades in general. And then I would start to use basal insulin just with that. So about 30 to 20 minutes before my first meal, I'm gonna pop in some basal insulin, not intramuscularly, that will be subcutaneously. And then the Nebivolol I'm gonna take in the morning with my first meal as well. So I hope that all kind of makes sense how I would structure my rest day compound usage. If you guys found this video useful, please let me know down below. Comment your questions. Happy to help out if I can, and happy to make more videos regarding this stuff. I'm gonna drop a prep update video very, very soon, so please be aware of that. And if you guys would like to see more, please do subscribe, hit the bell button, like and comment. It helps the algorithm tremendously. It helps me know that you guys are getting some satisfaction out of these videos and gives me some motivation in times like this. Deuces, have a beautiful day.